Imagine a quiet suburban neighborhood, the hum of cicadas in the air, and children laughing as they play in the park. But beneath the calm lies an unspoken tension, a chasm of mistrust that years of systemic inequality have carved deep into the lives of its residents. It's a place where every interaction carries weight, where a single moment can shatter or rebuild a fragile bond. On an ordinary afternoon in Riverwood, a veteran police officer and a little girl unknowingly spark a chain of events that will ripple through their community, forcing everyone to confront their deepest fears and biases. This is a story of conflict, redemption, and the power of forgiveness. A story that reminds us how the smallest actions can lead to monumental change. Officer Ryan Daniels tightened his grip on the steering wheel of his patrol car, his knuckles whitening as frustration bubbled beneath his professional exterior. It had been another grueling day, one filled with false alarms, petty disputes, and the kind of bureaucratic nonsense that drained his once bright sense of duty. The Riverwood Police Force had been his pride and purpose for over 2 decades. But these days, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that the job had become less about justice and more about surviving the grind. Driving through the narrow streets of Riverwood's predominantly black neighborhood, Ryan scanned the area with a mix of vigilance and unease. His eyes darted to the groups of teenagers laughing on the corner, his hand instinctively brushing the holster of his service weapon. "It's always this neighborhood," he muttered under his breath, a refrain he'd repeated too often to himself. As he turned onto a quieter street near a local park, something caught his attention. A small girl, no older than 5, sitting alone on the curb. She had dark curly hair that bounced as she moved a well-loved doll back and forth in her hands, lost in her own little world. Ryan frowned. A child that young shouldn't be outside alone. Not here. Not anywhere. "Where are her parents?" he muttered, pulling his patrol car to a stop at the curb. His mind jumped to the worst conclusions: neglect, abandonment, something worse. Ryan stepped out of the car, his boots hitting the pavement with a heavy thud, and marched toward the girl. His towering frame cast a long shadow over her small form. "Hey, kid," Ryan called out, his voice sharp and authoritative. "What are you doing out here? Where are your parents?" The little girl looked up at him, startled. Her big brown eyes widened with fear as she clutched her doll tightly against her chest. I, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Ryan's impatience flared. "Speak up. Where's your mom or dad? You shouldn't be out here alone." The girl's lower lip trembled as tears welled in her eyes. Before she could muster a response, Ryan's tone grew harsher, born from years of exhaustion and unchecked biases. "All right. If you're not going to tell me, I'm taking you to the station until we figure this out." Nearby, a few neighbors began to notice the commotion. Mrs. Taylor, a kind elderly woman who lived across the street, called out, "That's Ella. She's not alone. Her father's just around the corner." Ryan barely registered her words. His focus remained on the girl, Ella. "Step back, ma'am. This is police business," he barked, waving her away. His frustration mounted as more onlookers began to gather. Mr. Carter, a local resident walking his dog, stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Officer, that's Ella Johnson. Her father works at the community center down the street. You're making a mistake." Ryan's jaw clenched. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, their gazes accusatory and filled with outrage. But Ryan couldn't let himself back down. Not now, not in front of all these people. His grip on Ella's arm tightened as he reached for his radio. "I'm calling this in," he announced, his voice echoing over the growing tension. Ella cried out, her small body trembling as tears streamed down her face. "Daddy!" she wailed, her voice breaking. The crowd's anger boiled over, phones raised high to capture the scene. Let her go," Mrs. Taylor pleaded, her voice cracking. "She's just a child." Ryan, feeling cornered and defensive, pulled Ella toward his patrol car. "I'm taking her in until we sort this out," he declared, his tone resolute. The sound of tires screeching broke through the cacophony as a car pulled up abruptly. A tall man with a commanding presence stepped out. Marcus Johnson, Ella's father, and a respected civil rights attorney, strode toward the scene. His face was a mixture of fury and calm control, his voice steady but firm. "Officer, that's my daughter," Marcus said, locking eyes with Ryan. "Release her. Now." Ryan hesitated, the weight of his actions finally beginning to register. But his pride held him back. "Sir, I'm following protocol." "No," Marcus interrupted, his voice rising. "What you're doing is traumatizing a little girl who was playing near her home. Let her go. By now." The crowd had grown into a small assembly, their phones capturing every second of the confrontation. Ella's cries echoed in Ryan's ears, piercing through his professional facade. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he realized the situation was spiraling out of control. Marcus stepped closer, his tone cutting through the chaos. "This isn't over," he said, his words laced with both warning and promise. Ryan, feeling the mounting pressure, finally opened the car door and placed Ella inside, her sobs muffled by the closed windows. He drove away, leaving behind a storm of outrage and the echoes of a community's collective voice demanding justice. The early morning light streamed through the blinds of Officer Ryan Daniels' apartment, illuminating the disarray that reflected his state of mind. The air was thick with silence, punctuated only by the occasional hum of a distant car. On the small coffee table, his phone buzzed incessantly, notifications piling up faster than he could acknowledge them. Each vibration was a reminder of the firestorm he had unwittingly unleashed. Ryan hesitated before picking up his phone, his stomach knotting with dread. The first headline he saw sent a chill down his spine. "Officer arrests 5-year-old girl. Viral video sparks. Outrage in Riverwood." The accompanying video thumbnail, a still frame of him gripping Ella Johnson's arm as she cried out, was a stark reminder of the moment everything began to spiral out of control. Ryan pressed play, his jaw tightening, as he watched himself on the screen, his voice sharp, his actions unyielding. The crowd's outrage, Ella's cries, and Marcus Johnson's defiant words all played back with merciless clarity. The video, shared millions of times, had become the center of a nationwide debate. Social media was ablaze with hashtags like #Justice for Ella and #Stop Police Bias. Activists, celebrities, and political leaders weighed in, condemning Ryan's actions and calling for accountability. The comments section was a deluge of anger. How does this man still have a badge? Arresting a child? This is exactly why we need reform. Imagine if this were your daughter. Ryan tossed the phone onto the couch, the weight of his actions crashing down on him. His career, his reputation, and the life he'd built over 2 decades were now in jeopardy. Hours later, Ryan found himself seated in the chief's office. Chief Linda Carter, a no-nonsense woman known for her even-handed leadership, sat across from him. Her expression was grim, her fingers interlocked on the desk. "Ryan," she began, her voice steady but cold, "you've put this department in an impossible position." "I was following protocol," Ryan replied, his voice tinged with defensiveness. "The girl was alone, and enough." Chief Carter raised a hand, silencing him. "Protocol doesn't excuse poor judgment. You escalated a situation that required compassion, not force. Ryan's chest tightened as the chief slid a suspension notice across the desk. Effective immediately. You're suspended without pay, pending an internal investigation. Turn in your badge and weapon. The words hit him like a physical blow. Slowly, he unpinned his badge and placed it on the desk, followed by his service weapon. As he left the office, the hallway felt longer and colder than he remembered. His fellow officers avoided his gaze, some shaking their heads in silent judgment. Others muttered under their breath, their words a mix of disappointment and scorn. "Way to make us all look bad, Daniels," one officer whispered loud enough for him to hear. Ryan clenched his fists, but said nothing. The shame was suffocating. Meanwhile, Marcus Johnson stood at the podium of a packed press conference. Cameras flashed as reporters jotted down every word. Behind him stood community leaders, activists, and Ella, clinging to his hand, her doll tucked under her arm. "What happened to my daughter is not an isolated incident," Marcus declared, his voice steady and resolute. "It's a symptom of a broken system, one that views children like Ella as threats rather than innocent lives to be protected." The room erupted in applause, but Marcus wasn't finished. "We will not stop until there is accountability, not just for Officer Daniels, but for the policies and practices that allow this to happen. Today, I'm filing a lawsuit against the Riverwood Police Department." The announcement sent ripples through the crowd and beyond. News outlets quickly picked up the story, framing it as a watershed moment in the fight against systemic racism. Marcus, already a respected civil rights attorney, became the face of a growing movement. Protests were organized almost overnight, with demonstrators flooding the streets of Riverwood, holding signs that read, "Protect our children," "Justice for Ella," "End police bias now." Among the protesters was Maya Lopez, an investigative journalist determined to uncover the truth. Her articles painted a scathing picture of the department's history, highlighting other cases of alleged misconduct. Her most recent headline read, "A Pattern of Prejudice, Riverwood Police Under Fire." Maya's reporting intensified the scrutiny on Ryan, revealing past complaints that had been quietly dismissed. The public demanded answers, and Chief Carter struggled to balance the growing unrest with maintaining morale within her department. Back in his apartment, Ryan sat on the edge of his couch, staring blankly at the television. News anchors debated his actions, their voices blurring into white noise. He reached for his phone, scrolling through messages he wished he hadn't opened. His sister's text read, "Ryan, I saw the video. I can't believe this is you. What were you thinking?" Another message, from his teenage daughter, Emma, hit even harder. "Dad, my friends are asking about you. I don't know what to say." Emma's words cut deeper than any public condemnation. Their relationship had already been strained by Ryan's long hours and rigid worldview. Now, he wondered if it could ever be repaired. As night fell, Ryan found himself alone with his thoughts. He poured himself a drink, hoping to numb the turmoil inside. Instead, memories surfaced, moments he had buried deep. He thought of a traffic stop years ago, where he had detained a young black man for looking suspicious. The man had done nothing wrong. Then there was the time he had broken up a family barbecue, assuming it was a disruptive party. Each memory was a thread in a tapestry of biases he hadn't wanted to see. "Was I wrong?" he muttered to the empty room, his voice tinged with both defensiveness and doubt. The image of Ella's tear-streaked face haunted him, her cries replaying in his mind. For the first time, Ryan began to question whether his adherence to protocol was a shield for something deeper, something darker. At the same time, Marcus worked tirelessly to keep the momentum alive. Late nights were spent planning protests, coordinating with Maya for media coverage, and ensuring Ella felt safe amidst the chaos. One night, as Marcus tucked Ella into bed, she looked up at him with wide eyes. "Daddy, why was the policeman so mean?" she asked softly. Marcus swallowed the lump in his throat. "Sometimes people don't see what's right in front of them," he said gently. "But we're going to help them understand. Okay?" Ella nodded, her trust in her father unwavering. Marcus kissed her forehead, his resolve stronger than ever. The chapter ends with two parallel images. Marcus, standing at his office window, looking out at the growing protest below, his face a mixture of determination and exhaustion. Ryan, sitting in the dim light of his apartment, staring at his badge on the coffee table, his reflection fractured and uncertain. Both men, though on opposite sides of the conflict, are grappling with questions of identity, justice, and the road ahead. Ryan Daniels sat alone at his kitchen table, staring blankly at a half-empty coffee cup. The dim light from the overhead bulb cast long shadows across the room, reflecting the turmoil within him. Days had passed since his suspension, but the storm surrounding him showed no signs of abating. The news cycle had moved from coverage of the protests to dissection of his career, dragging every misstep into the light. The quiet was broken by the ticking of the wall clock, each second a reminder of how his life had unraveled. He reached for his phone, hesitating before unlocking it. Messages from his estranged teenage daughter, Emma, stared back at him. Her last text read, "I don't know if I can visit this weekend. Everyone's talking about you, Dad. It's hard." Ryan exhaled sharply, his chest tightening. Emma had been his anchor in recent years, especially after his divorce. The thought of losing her trust was unbearable, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he was slipping further away from her with every passing day. He set the phone down, letting his head fall into his hands. The image of Ella Johnson's tear-streaked face haunted him, replaying over and over. Her cries of "Daddy" pierced through his thoughts, forcing him to confront the full weight of what he had done. As the silence enveloped him, Ryan's mind drifted back to his early days on the force. He had once been a wide-eyed recruit, driven by a sense of duty and justice. He remembered the day he first pinned on his badge, standing proudly in front of his parents. His mother had hugged him tightly, whispering, "You're going to make a difference." For years, he had believed those words. He had taken every call with enthusiasm, every arrest with purpose. But over time, the weight of the job began to erode his optimism. The late nights, the endless bureaucracy, and the unspoken culture within the department had chipped away at him. Ryan's thoughts shifted to a moment he hadn't revisited in years, a traffic stop early in his career. He had pulled over a black man, driving a luxury car late at night. The man, Terrence Fields, was polite and cooperative, but Ryan's instincts told him something was off. "I need you to step out of the vehicle," Ryan had demanded, his hand resting on his holster. Terrence had complied, his hands raised in surrender. It wasn't until backup arrived that Ryan realized his mistake. The car wasn't stolen, and Terrence was a successful real estate developer on his way home. Ryan had apologized, but the damage was done. Terrence's expression, equal parts anger and resignation, remained etched in Ryan's memory. More memories surfaced, each one adding to the growing unease in Ryan's chest. There was the time he had responded to a noise complaint at a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood, assuming it was a rowdy party. Instead, it had been a quinceañera, a family celebration filled with laughter and music. His aggressive approach had left the guests stunned and offended. Another incident involved a young black teen, Jordan Hayes, accused of shoplifting Ryan had detained him without evidence, only to later discover the real culprit was a white customer who had walked out unnoticed. Jordan's mother had yelled at him in the store, her voice shaking with fury and fear. "You didn't even look at anyone else, did you?" Ryan had brushed off these moments as misunderstandings at the time, but now, as they played out in his mind, they formed a pattern he could no longer ignore. The biases he had thought he didn't possess were woven into his decisions, shaping his actions in ways he was only beginning to see. Ryan's reflection was interrupted by the sound of his phone buzzing. It was Emma, calling for the first time in days. He hesitated before answering, unsure if he could handle the conversation. "Hey, Dad," Emma said, her voice cautious. "Hey, kiddo," Ryan replied, forcing a smile she couldn't see. There was a pause before Emma continued. "Everyone at school saw the video. They're saying you're a racist. Is it true?" The question hit Ryan like a punch to the gut. "Emma, I made a mistake," he began, his voice wavering. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, but I see now that I did." Emma's silence was deafening. "You always told me to stand up for what's right," she said finally. "But what you did to that little girl, it wasn't right." Ryan's heart sank. "You're right, Emma. I wasn't right. And I need to figure out how to make it better." The call ended soon after, leaving Ryan feeling more lost than ever. His daughter's words echoed in his mind, challenging him to face truths he had long avoided. Later that evening, Ryan sat at his desk, staring at a flyer he had picked up from a local community board. It advertised a meeting at a nearby church, focused on building trust between police and residents. His first instinct was to dismiss it. He wasn't ready to face the anger and pain he knew would be there. But something in Emma's voice pushed him to reconsider. When the night of the meeting arrived, Ryan slipped into the church quietly, keeping to the back. The room was filled with people of all ages and backgrounds, their faces a mix of anger, exhaustion, and hope. Ryan recognized Marcus Johnson standing at the front, addressing the crowd with a calm yet impassioned voice. "We're not here to tear down. We're here to build up," Marcus said. "But that starts with accountability and understanding." As Marcus spoke about Ella's lingering fear and the broader issues of racial bias in policing, Ryan felt a pang of guilt that was impossible to ignore. For the first time, he saw his actions not as isolated mistakes, but as part of a system that had caused immense harm. The meeting ended with a moment of silence for victims of police violence. As the crowd dispersed, Ryan lingered, his heart heavy, but his mind clearer than it had been in days. He wasn't sure what came next, but he knew one thing: change had to start with him. As he walked out into the crisp night air, the distant sounds of the city seemed quieter, as if the world were holding its breath. For the first time in years, Ryan felt the stirrings of something he thought he had lost, a desire to be better, not just for himself, but for the community he had failed to protect. Marcus Johnson stood on the steps of Riverwood Community Center, clutching a microphone with one hand and holding Ella's small hand with the other. His voice echoed through the courtyard as he addressed the crowd gathered before him. Protest signs bearing slogans like "Justice for Ella" and "End Police Bias" waved in the air. The anger and pain on the faces of his neighbors mirrored his own. "My daughter, a 5-year-old child, was treated like a criminal," Marcus said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "This isn't just about Ella. This is about every child, every family in Riverwood, who lives in fear of the people sworn to protect them." The crowd erupted into applause and shouts of agreement. Ella clung tightly to her father's side, her wide eyes scanning the sea of faces. Despite her young age, she seemed to sense the importance of the moment. Nearby, Maya Lopez, a fiery journalist with a reputation for holding those in power accountable, filmed the scene with her team. Maya had been covering systemic racism in policing for years, but Ella's story struck a personal chord. She approached Marcus after his speech, her notebook in hand. "Mr. Johnson," Maya said, "I want to help share your story. People need to understand what's happening here." Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. "The world needs to know that this can't keep happening." Within days, Marcus became the face of a growing movement in Riverwood. He organized marches, held press conferences, and connected with civil rights organizations. Each step was fueled by his love for Ella and his determination to prevent other families from enduring the same pain. Maya's coverage amplified their cause. Her articles in major outlets brought national attention to Riverwood, turning Ella's arrest into a symbol of systemic issues within the police force. The public response was overwhelming. Letters of support poured in from across the country, along with offers of legal aid and financial backing for Marcus's efforts. Meanwhile, Chief Linda Carter found herself caught between the growing demands of the community and the defensive posture of her department. A seasoned leader known for her calm demeanor, Linda felt the weight of every protest sign and angry chant. During a tense meeting with her officers, Linda addressed the department's morale. "We've made mistakes," she admitted, her voice firm. "And it's our responsibility to fix them. This isn't about picking sides. It's about doing what's right." But the room was divided. Some officers nodded in agreement, while others grumbled about being unfairly targeted. Linda knew change wouldn't come easily, but she also understood that the department couldn't survive without it. As the protest gained momentum, Maya and her team began digging into Officer Ryan Daniels' past. Late one night, in the glow of her laptop, Maya came across a court document that sent a chill down her spine. A report of a wrongful detainment involving a black family 3 years earlier. The details were hauntingly similar to Ella's case. Ryan had acted on an unfounded suspicion, detaining a father and his 2 teenage sons for hours before releasing them without charges. Maya immediately contacted Marcus, who listened in stunned silence as she shared her findings. "This isn't just one incident," Maya said. "It's a pattern." Marcus leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "We need to bring this to light. People need to see the bigger picture." The next morning, Marcus and Maya held a press conference. As Maya detailed the newly uncovered case, the crowd's reaction was explosive. Cries of outrage filled the air, and the momentum of the movement surged. Marcus took the microphone, his voice steady but resolute. "This isn't just about Ryan Daniels," he said. "It's about a system that allows bias to thrive unchecked. It's about the change we owe to our children." Amid the public fight, Marcus wrestled with his private grief. Ella's trauma was a constant reminder of why he was fighting, but it also weighed heavily on him. Nightmares haunted her sleep, and she clung to Marcus more than ever. One evening, as Marcus tucked Ella into bed, she asked, "Daddy, why did the policeman think I was bad?" Marcus's heart ached at the question. "Sweetheart, you're not bad. You're brave and kind and wonderful. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes because they don't understand." "Will he say sorry?" Ella asked, her big eyes searching his face. Marcus hesitated. "I don't know, baby, but I promise I'll do everything I can to make sure he can't hurt anyone else." After Ella fell asleep, Marcus sat alone in the dark, grappling with the weight of his promise. His fight wasn't just about holding Ryan accountable. It was about rebuilding a community's trust and giving his daughter a safer world. The movement brought people from all walks of life together. Churches hosted meetings, schools held discussions on racial bias, and local businesses put up signs supporting the cause. Marcus, always at the forefront, worked tirelessly to ensure the momentum didn't wane. At one rally, Marcus introduced speakers from neighboring communities who shared similar stories of police bias. Their testimonies painted a picture that was both devastating and unifying. It wasn't just Riverwood. It was everywhere. Maya, covering the event, noted the shift in the crowd's energy. What had started as anger was transforming into determination. The people of Riverwood weren't just protesting. They were demanding solutions. As the weeks passed, Marcus found himself in a direct confrontation with Chief Carter. In a closed-door meeting at City Hall, the two faced off over the department's response to the protests. "We need accountability," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. "Not empty promises." "And I need time to fix this," Linda countered. "I can't overhaul the entire department overnight." "Then start with Ryan Daniels," Marcus said, leaning forward. "Acknowledge what he did and hold him accountable." Linda met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Accountability goes both ways, Mr. Johnson. If we're going to move forward, we need dialogue, not ultimatums." Marcus left the meeting frustrated, but not defeated. He knew the road ahead would be long, but his resolve remained unshaken. One evening, Marcus received a call from an unexpected number. Chief Carter wanted him to attend a private meeting with Ryan Daniels. It was an olive branch, but Marcus wasn't sure if he was ready to take it. As he stared at his phone, Ella's laughter echoed from the other room. He thought about her question. Will he say sorry? And realized that facing Ryan might be the first step toward the healing his family and community desperately needed. Marcus agreed to the meeting, knowing it wouldn't be easy. But if there was even a chance of change, he owed it to Ella to try. The conference room at Riverwood's community center was unusually quiet, save for the ticking of a clock mounted on the far wall. Ryan Daniels sat at one end of the long table, his posture rigid, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Opposite him, Marcus Johnson entered, his movements deliberate. Both men locked eyes for a brief moment before Marcus sat down, his expression a mixture of distrust and determination. Chief Linda Carter, acting as the mediator, broke the silence. "Gentlemen, I appreciate you both agreeing to be here today. This is a first step, small, but important." Ryan cleared his throat, struggling to find his voice. "Mr. Johnson," he began, but the words faltered. He glanced at the folder he had brought, a prepared statement meant to guide him through this confrontation. But it felt hollow now. Marcus leaned forward, his voice cold. "I'm listening." The weight of the room was suffocating. Ryan finally looked Marcus in the eye. "I want to say, I'm sorry. What I did to your daughter, it was wrong. I thought I was protecting her, but I see now that I caused harm." Marcus's jaw tightened. "You thought you were protecting her? She's 5 years old, Officer Daniels. Protecting her meant leaving her alone to play in peace." "I see that now," Ryan said, his voice breaking. "I see a lot of things I didn't before." Linda watched them carefully, intervening as Ryan's voice wavered. "This is not about excusing actions. It's about understanding, accountability, and moving forward." Marcus exhaled sharply. "Understanding? My daughter still wakes up crying some nights, asking why the man in blue didn't believe she was good. What exactly do you think your apology changes?" Ryan's head lowered. "Nothing," he admitted quietly. "It doesn't change anything. But I want to learn how to do better. I want to make sure no child goes through what Ella did because of me or anyone else." Marcus studied him, searching for any hint of disingenuousness. Finally, he leaned back, crossing his arms. "You want to make amends? Prove it. Words mean nothing if actions don't follow." Linda interjected, her tone firm but hopeful. This is where we start. Officer Daniels has volunteered to participate in community outreach programs, to listen, to learn, and to face the people his actions have affected. Ryan nodded. I'm committed. Whatever it takes. Marcus didn't respond immediately. The room grew silent once more, the tension heavy as the two men faced the beginning of an uncertain journey. Later that week, Marcus attended a packed meeting at the community center, this time as a speaker. The room was filled with families, activists, and local leaders, all eager to hear his thoughts on the future of their movement. But the crowd buzzed with whispers when Ryan entered the room and took a seat in the back. Why is he here? One man muttered. This better not be some PR stunt. Another woman said sharply. Marcus took the microphone and cleared his throat, silencing the chatter. I know you all have questions, he began. And I do too. But let me be clear. This is not about one man. It's about a system that has failed us all. And if we're going to demand change, we have to be willing to have the hard conversations. The crowd murmured in agreement, though their eyes occasionally flicked to Ryan, who sat quietly, his face flushed. Maya Lopez, seated near the front, scribbled furiously in her notebook, capturing every word. As the meeting progressed, Marcus opened the floor to questions. A young woman stood up, her voice trembling with anger. How can we trust someone like him? She asked, pointing toward Ryan. How can we believe anything will change? Ryan, feeling the weight of her gaze, slowly stood. His voice was unsteady but earnest. You have every right not to trust me. I've made mistakes, big ones. But I'm here because I want to listen. I want to understand. And I want to help rebuild what I've broken. The room fell silent, the rawness of his admission cutting through the skepticism. Marcus watched him closely, still unsure whether Ryan's actions would ever match his words. After the meeting, Ryan lingered in the center's lobby, unsure if he should stay or leave. To his surprise, a boy no older than 8 approached him, his wide eyes filled with curiosity. Are you the bad cop? The boy asked bluntly. Ryan's heart sank. I don't want to be, he replied honestly. I'm trying to be better. The boy tilted his head, as if weighing Ryan's words. You should say sorry to her, he said, pointing to Ella, who was peeking around a corner. Ryan's breath caught. He nodded. You're right. He walked over to Marcus and Ella, who were preparing to leave. Mr. Johnson, Ella, Ryan said softly, kneeling to meet Ella's eye level. I'm sorry for what I did to you. It was wrong, and I'll never stop trying to make it right. Ella no respondio immediatamente. She clutched her father's leg tightly, but eventually whispered, Okay. For Marcus, the moment was bittersweet, a small step in a journey that still felt impossibly long. Word of Ryan's appearance at the meeting spread quickly through the neighborhood. While some dismissed it as performative, others saw it as a sign of genuine effort. Marcus, though still cautious, began to recognize a shift in the community's energy. The focus was expanding beyond one man to the broader fight for systemic reform. Maya's latest article, titled A Fragile Step Forward, captured the nuance of the situation. Trust isn't given, it's earned. And for Riverwood, the path to healing starts here. Ryan, emboldened by the meeting's outcome, threw himself into the volunteer work suggested by Chief Carter. He began spending time at the community center, helping organize youth events and mentoring teens. Slowly, he started forming connections with Marcus, with Ella, and with the people he once viewed through a lens of bias. One evening, Marcus received a call from Maya. Ryan's trying, she said. I think people are starting to notice. Marcus sighed. Trying isn't enough, but it's a start. At a late-night rally, Marcus took the stage, his voice ringing with conviction. This isn't about tearing down. It's about building up, building a community where our children can thrive without fear, where accountability and justice go hand in hand. In the crowd, Ryan stood among the attendees, listening intently. The words resonated deeply, reinforcing his commitment to the work ahead. As the rally ended, Marcus and Ryan crossed paths. They exchanged a brief nod, an unspoken acknowledgement of the road still to come. The small cafe on the edge of Riverwood was known for its quiet atmosphere, the kind of place where people came to think, not talk. On this day, however, its serene environment was disrupted by the presence of two unlikely patrons. Marcus Johnson sat at a table near the back, his posture rigid and his eyes trained on the door. The tension in his expression mirrored the storm within him, anger, distrust, and a cautious curiosity. When the door opened and Ryan Daniels stepped inside, Marcus's jaw clenched. Ryan scanned the cafe briefly before spotting Marcus. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither moved. Then Ryan nodded slightly and walked over. "Marcus," Ryan greeted, his voice low and cautious as he extended a hand. Marcus ignored the gesture. "Let's get this over with." Ryan sat down slowly, folding his hands on the table. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. Finally, Ryan cleared his throat. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me." Marcus's expression hardened. "Don't thank me. I'm here for answers, not pleasantries." Ryan nodded, accepting the hostility. "Fair enough. I owe you that much." "I don't even know where to start," Ryan admitted after a pause. "There's so much I need to say, and none of it feels like enough." Marcus leaned back, crossing his arms. "Try starting with the truth. Why did you handcuff my daughter, Ryan? What went through your mind when you looked at a 5-year-old girl and decided she was a threat?" The question struck Ryan like a blow. He swallowed hard, his fingers tightening into a fist on the table. "I was wrong," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I acted on assumptions, on fear, and prejudice. I thought I was doing my job, protecting her. But the truth is, I didn't see Ella as a child in that moment. I saw her through the lens of every bias I've absorbed over the years." Marcus's jaw tightened, his voice cold. "Do you even hear yourself? You're admitting you didn't see my daughter's humanity. Do you know how much damage you've caused?" "I do, now," Ryan replied, his eyes glistening. "Every day since that incident, I've thought about Ella's face, her tears, and the fear in her eyes. I hate myself for it, Marcus. I really do." For the first time, Marcus saw a crack in Ryan's hardened exterior, a glimpse of genuine remorse, but it wasn't enough to extinguish his own pain. "Words are easy," Marcus said sharply. "What are you actually doing to make sure this doesn't happen again?" Ryan hesitated, then began to speak carefully. "I've been volunteering at the community center, listening to stories, helping where I can. I've started to see things differently. But it's not just about changing myself, it's about changing the system that allowed me to act the way I did." Marcus studied him, his skepticism evident. "Do you really believe one man can change a system like this?" Ryan shook his head. "Number. But I believe change starts with accountability. If I can take responsibility for my actions and use my experience to push for reform, maybe I can help others see the harm they're causing." Marcus exhaled deeply, his anger softening into something more reflective. "Do you know how many fathers like me have had to teach their kids to be afraid of people like you? How to survive an encounter with the police? That's the reality we live in, Ryan. And it's exhausting." Ryan's shoulders slumped, I can't undo what I've done, but I want to help build a world where kids like Ella don't have to live in fear, where fathers like you can trust officers like me." The words hung in the air, a tentative olive branch. Marcus didn't take it, but he didn't reject it either. As the conversation continued, the hostility between the two men began to thaw, replaced by an uneasy understanding. Ryan shared stories of his early days on the force, his idealism eroding under the weight of a flawed system. Marcus spoke of his struggles as a single father, raising Ella in a world that seemed determined to devalue her. At one point, Marcus asked, "Do you even know what Ella's favorite color is?" Ryan blinked, caught off guard. "No, I don't. It's purple," Marcus said, a faint smile touching his lips. "She loves drawing pictures of flowers, and she always colors them purple." Ryan's throat tightened. "She's an amazing kid. I'm so sorry for what I put her through." Marcus met Ryan's gaze, his expression unreadable. "She's stronger than you realize, but she shouldn't have to be." By the end of the meeting, neither man was fully satisfied, but both understood that they had taken the first step toward something larger. As they stood to leave, Marcus looked Ryan in the eye. "This doesn't mean I forgive you. Not yet. But I'm willing to see where this goes." Ryan nodded. "That's more than I deserve. Thank you." As they parted ways, the air between them was still heavy with unresolved tension, but there was also a faint glimmer of hope. Word of their meeting spread quickly through Riverwood, sparking a wave of debate. Some saw it as a promising step toward reconciliation, while others viewed it as a betrayal of the fight for justice. Maya Lopez's article the next day captured the complexity of the situation. Forgiveness is not a requirement for change, but dialogue is a necessity. In Riverwood, two men on opposite sides of a divide are finding common ground. Time will tell if their efforts can bridge the gap. Meanwhile, at the community center, Ella asked Marcus, "Did you talk to the bad cop today?" Marcus knelt down to her level, his heart aching. "Yes, baby girl. I did." "Is he still bad?" Ella asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Marcus hesitated, then replied, "I don't know yet, but I think he's trying to be better." The chapter ends with Ryan standing in his apartment, staring at his reflection in the mirror. For the first time in years, he saw not just a cop, but a man deeply flawed, yet determined to change. Across town, Marcus tucked Ella into bed, her favorite purple flowers adorning the walls of her room. He watched her sleep, his heart heavy but hopeful. Change wouldn't come easily, but for her sake, he was willing to try. The first day Ryan Daniels walked into the Riverwood Community Center as a volunteer, he felt the weight of dozens of eyes on him. Whispers traveled through the small, sunlit room, and parents ushered their children closer, creating a visible barrier of mistrust. Ryan's uniform was absent, but the memory of his actions loomed large, a shadow he couldn't shake. "Ryan, over here," Marcus called from across the room, his tone neutral but firm. Marcus stood by a table piled high with art supplies, where children were laughing and coloring. Ella was among them, her face lighting up as she carefully shaded a butterfly with a purple crayon. Ryan's chest tightened at the sight of her, the embodiment of innocence he had so deeply shaken. Gathering his courage, Ryan crossed the room, aware of every sidelong glance and hushed conversation. "Thanks for letting me help," he said quietly to Marcus. Marcus didn't smile, but he nodded. "We'll see how it goes." Ryan's first task was helping the children with their art projects. Sitting beside a young boy named Jordan, he noticed the boy pulling away slightly, his small hand clutching the edge of the table. "Need help with your tree?" Ryan asked gently, pointing to the boy's half-finished drawing. Jordan glanced up, his eyes wide and cautious. "My mom says you're the bad cop," he murmured, his voice barely audible. Ryan's throat tightened. He took a deep breath before responding. "I've made some bad choices, Jordan, but I'm here because I want to make things right. Can I help you color the leaves?" Jordan hesitated, then slid the green crayon toward Ryan. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. From across the room, Marcus watched the exchange closely, his expression unreadable. He caught Ella glancing at Ryan, her curiosity evident. She whispered something to her friend, who giggled, and for the first time, Ryan felt the faintest glimmer of hope. Outside the community center, Ryan's presence became a hot topic of debate. Parents questioned Marcus's decision to allow the disgraced officer into their safe space. "I don't trust him around my kids," said Maria, a mother of two, who had been an active voice in the protests against Ryan. "He's just here to fix his image." Marcus remained steadfast. "People don't change overnight, Maria. But if we want to see real reform, we have to let them try." Not everyone shared Marcus's willingness to give Ryan a chance. At a town meeting, tensions boiled over when Ryan's name came up. "How can we trust a man who handcuffed a 5-year-old?" a local activist demanded. Ryan, sitting quietly in the back of the room, felt the sting of every word. He didn't defend himself. He knew he couldn't. Instead, he listened, absorbing the anger and pain his actions had caused. One day, as Ryan was organizing sports equipment in the community center's storage room, a teenager named Jamal approached him. At 16, Jamal was tall, with sharp features and a chip on his shoulder that seemed to weigh him down. "You really think you can make up for what you did?" Jamal asked, leaning against the doorframe. Ryan turned to face him, taken aback by the directness. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I'm trying." Jamal scoffed. "Trying won't erase what people like you have done to people like me." The words hit Ryan like a punch, but he refused to look away. "You're right," he said. "Oh, it won't. But maybe I can help make sure it doesn't keep happening." Jamal studied him for a moment, his gaze hard and unyielding. Then he smirked. "You're lucky Marcus believes in you. I don't." Over time, however, Ryan and Jamal's interactions became less hostile. Ryan began mentoring Jamal, helping him prepare for a police academy exam he'd been hesitant to pursue. Their conversations were often tense, filled with challenging questions about authority and race, but they marked a shift in Ryan's understanding of what it meant to truly serve a community. As weeks passed, Ella began to approach Ryan cautiously. One afternoon, she tugged on his sleeve as he was helping another child with homework. "Mr. Ryan," she said softly, her big brown eyes looking up at him. Ryan turned, his heart pounding. "Yes, Ella." "Can you help me with my math?" she asked, holding up a worksheet. Ryan knelt beside her, his voice steady but his hands trembling. "Of course. Let's do it together." They worked through the problems slowly, Ella's confidence growing with each correct answer. When they finished, she smiled shyly and said, "You're better at math than Daddy." Ryan chuckled, a lump forming in his throat. "Don't tell him that. It'll hurt his feelings." Ella giggled and skipped back to her seat. Across the room, Marcus watched the interaction, his expression softening ever so slightly. As part of his volunteer efforts, Ryan spearheaded a neighborhood cleanup initiative. On a bright Saturday morning, residents gathered with trash bags and gloves, their skepticism about Ryan still lingering. Despite the chilly reception, Ryan worked tirelessly, picking up litter and hauling heavy debris alongside the community members. At one point, he joined a group of kids painting over graffiti on a playground wall. "What should we draw instead?" one of the kids asked. "How about a rainbow?" Ryan suggested. Ella chimed in, "With purple flowers." The kids laughed and got to work, their brushes creating vibrant colors that began to transform the wall. Ryan stepped back, watching as the community came together, even if only for a moment. Word of Ryan's efforts slowly spread. Parents who had once avoided him began to acknowledge his presence with cautious nods. Children greeted him with tentative smiles. Even Jamal's hardened demeanor softened as Ryan continued to mentor him. One evening, as Ryan was leaving the community center, Marcus approached him. "You've come a long way," Marcus said, his tone measured. "But you've got a lot more to prove." Ryan nodded. "I know. And I'm not stopping." Despite the progress, Ryan still faced backlash from the broader community. An anonymous article surfaced, detailing his past misconduct and reigniting public outrage. Protesters gathered outside the community center, demanding his removal. "Why are you still defending him?" Maria asked Marcus, her voice sharp with anger. "He hasn't changed. He's just hiding behind good deeds." Marcus looked at Maria, his expression firm. "Change isn't about perfection, Maria. It's about effort. And he's trying." Inside the center, Ryan watched the protests through a window, his heart sinking. He knew redemption wouldn't come easily, but the weight of public scrutiny was suffocating. That evening, Ryan sat alone in his apartment, scrolling through social media. The comments were brutal, accusing him of pandering, performative allyship, and worse. For a moment, he considered giving up, but then he thought of Ella's smile, Jamal's determination, and the mural they had painted together. He picked up his phone and called Marcus. "I'm not quitting," he said firmly, "no matter how hard it gets." "Good," Marcus replied, "because this fight is far from over." The morning started like any other. Ryan Daniels was on his way to the Riverwood Community Center, mentally preparing for the day. Despite the challenges, he had begun to find a rhythm in his work. Volunteering with the kids, mentoring Jamal, and earning tentative trust from a skeptical community were steps forward. But everything changed when his phone buzzed with a notification. The headline was stark. "Disgraced officer's troubled past. Another family comes forward." Ryan pulled his car over, his hands trembling as he opened the article. It detailed an incident from 6 years earlier, when he had stopped a black family on suspicion of car theft. The article revealed how he had detained the parents in front of their young children, only to find out later that the vehicle was theirs. The family had filed a complaint, but the case had been quietly dismissed by the department. Photos of the terrified children and Ryan's cold expression during the stop accompanied the story. It was undeniable, and it reignited the outrage that had barely begun to simmer down. The story spread like wildfire. Social media erupted with hashtags condemning Ryan, the police force, and systemic racism. Local news stations broadcast panel discussions dissecting his actions. Clips of the PIS incident were juxtaposed with the viral video of Ella's arrest, painting a damning picture. Protesters gathered outside the community center, holding signs with messages like, "No redemption for racism," and "Protect our kids, not abusers." The noise was deafening, and the air was thick with anger. Inside the center, Marcus Johnson was in his office when he received a knock at the door. Maya Lopez, the journalist who had helped uncover Ryan's past misconduct, stood there, holding a notepad. "Marcus, do you have a comment on the latest revelations about Ryan Daniels?" she asked, her tone professional but probing. Marcus sighed deeply, leaning back in his chair. "I don't condone what he's done in the past, Maya, but I've seen the effort he's making now." "Do you believe effort is enough?" she pressed. That's for the community to decide, Marcus replied. But I believe in second chances, when they're earned. Ryan arrived at the community center to find a sea of protesters blocking the entrance. Some yelled insults, others simply stared, their eyes burning with betrayal. As he approached, he heard someone shout, "Get out of our neighborhood, Daniels." He froze, unsure whether to push through or turn back. Marcus stepped out of the building and waved him over. "Come inside," he said firmly. Once they were behind closed doors, Ryan slumped into a chair. "It's all falling apart," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. I thought I was making progress." Marcus folded his arms. "Progress doesn't erase the past, Ryan. People have every right to be angry." "But I'm trying," Ryan said, his voice cracking. "Doesn't that count for something?" "It does," Marcus said. "But it's not about what you think you deserve. It's about what they need to see." Later that afternoon, the community center's board held an emergency meeting. Parents and staff packed the room, their voices rising as they debated whether Ryan should be allowed to continue volunteering. Maria, one of the most vocal critics, stood up. "How can we let someone like him around our kids? He's a reminder of everything we're trying to protect them from." Others were more measured. "But he's been helping," said Jamal, surprising everyone by speaking up. "He's not perfect, but he's been trying." The room fell silent as Jamal continued. "I didn't think I'd ever trust someone like him. But he's listened to me. He's helped me. That's gotta mean something, right?" Despite Jamal's plea, the board voted to temporarily suspend Ryan from volunteering. Marcus delivered the news personally. "I understand," Ryan said quietly, though the pain in his eyes was unmistakable. That evening, Ryan sat on the front steps of the community center, staring at the protesters dispersing as the sun set. He heard small footsteps behind him and turned to see Ella. "Mr. Ryan?" she asked, clutching her doll. "Yes, Ella," he said, forcing a small smile. "Are you leaving?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ryan nodded. "For now, but I'll still be around. I'll always be rooting for you, okay?" Ella's eyes filled with tears. "But I don't want you to go." Ryan's throat tightened. Sometimes we have to step back to make things better, Ella. But I'll come back, if they let me." She reached out and hugged him tightly, her small arms wrapping around his shoulders. It was a gesture of forgiveness he didn't feel he deserved, but one that gave him strength. As Marcus watched the interaction from a distance, he felt a pang of doubt. Could Ryan truly change? And if so, was it his responsibility to help him? That night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, poring over messages from friends and community leaders, many of whom urged him to cut ties with Ryan. But as he scrolled through his phone, he came across a video of Ella laughing with Ryan during one of their art sessions. Her smile was genuine, her laughter unguarded. It was a rare moment of peace after months of turmoil. Marcus made a decision. He picked up his phone and called Ryan. "We're not done yet," he said, "but you've got a long way to go." Determined to turn the scandal into an opportunity for growth, Marcus proposed a bold idea: a town hall where Ryan could address the community directly. The plan was risky, but Marcus believed that confronting the anger head-on was the only way forward. Ryan hesitated. "What if it backfires?" he asked. "Then it backfires," Marcus replied. "But if you're serious about change, you've got to face this." The room was packed. Community members filled every seat, their expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. Ryan stood at the front, his hands trembling as he gripped the microphone. "I'm not here to ask for your forgiveness," he began. "I'm here to take responsibility for my actions." He recounted the incident from 6 years ago, his voice faltering as he described the fear he had seen in the children's eyes. He spoke about Ella, about how her bravery had forced him to confront the biases he hadn't even realized he carried. "I've spent my career thinking I was one of the good guys," he said. "But good intentions don't excuse bad actions. I've caused harm, and I can't undo that. All I can do is try to make things right." When he finished, the room was silent. Then, one by one, people began to speak. Some were angry, others cautiously supportive. The dialogue was raw and painful, but it was a step toward understanding. The town hall didn't erase the scandal, but it shifted the narrative. Ryan's willingness to admit his mistakes and face the community earned him grudging respect from some. Marcus, too, faced criticism, but stood firm in his belief that change required difficult conversations. As the night ended, Ryan approached Marcus. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me a chance." "Don't thank me yet," Marcus replied. "This is just the beginning." The town hall marked a turning point, but the road ahead remained fraught with tension and skepticism. Marcus Johnson and Ryan Daniels knew they had to keep the momentum going. After the meeting, Marcus suggested a bold initiative, a collaborative event that would bring the police and the community together in dialogue. "We can't keep fighting from opposite sides," Marcus said during a late-night phone call with Ryan. "If you're serious about making amends, let's create a space where both sides can speak freely." Ryan hesitated. "Do you think anyone will show up? After everything?" "They'll show," Marcus replied confidently, "but only if they believe it's worth their time. That means you'll need to be honest, completely honest." Planning the event wasn't easy. Community leaders were wary of giving Ryan a platform, and the police department was reluctant to lend support. Chief Linda Carter, already under pressure from ongoing protests, met with Marcus and Ryan to discuss the logistics. "I don't want this turning into another PR nightmare," she said, her tone sharp. "If we're going to do this, it has to be constructive." "It will be," Marcus assured her. "But we need full transparency. No sugarcoating." Chief Carter nodded reluctantly. "Fine. But Ryan, if this goes south, you'll have to take full responsibility." Ryan agreed, the weight of the responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. Meanwhile, Marcus enlisted Maya Lopez to help spread the word. As a journalist, Maya had the credibility to reach skeptical community members. She crafted a series of articles and social media posts highlighting the event's purpose. A conversation for change, bridging the gap between Riverwood's police and its people. The day of the event arrived, and the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Held in the gymnasium of a local high school, the room was set with folding chairs arranged in a circle to encourage open dialogue. A microphone stood at the center, symbolizing the importance of giving everyone a voice. Community members filed in slowly, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Ryan, standing near the stage, felt a knot tighten in his stomach as he noticed the skeptical glares directed his way. Marcus stood beside him, offering a reassuring nod. "This isn't about you," Marcus reminded him quietly. "It's about all of us." As the room filled, Marcus stepped forward to address the crowd. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "We're here because our community is hurting. But we're also here because we believe things can get better, if we're willing to work together." He gestured for Ryan to join him. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder as Ryan stepped to the microphone. "I know many of you don't trust me," Ryan began, his voice steady despite the tension. "And I don't blame you. I've made mistakes that have hurt people, that have hurt this community. I'm not here to defend those actions. I'm here to listen, to learn, and to help find a way forward. The dialogue began cautiously. At first, only a few people were willing to speak. An elderly man named Mr. Carter recounted how he had been profiled by the police years earlier. A young mother shared her fear of letting her teenage son walk home alone at night. Ryan listened intently, his heart heavy with guilt. He saw the pain in their faces, heard the tremble in their voices, and realized the depth of the mistrust he had been a part of creating. Then, a teenage boy named Malik spoke up. "How can we trust you, Officer Daniels?" he asked, his voice laced with anger. "How do we know you're not just doing this to save your own skin?" Ryan stepped forward, his eyes meeting Malik's. "You're right to ask that," he said. "I can't expect you to trust me right away. All I can do is show you through my actions that I'm committed to change." The honesty in his tone seemed to resonate with the crowd. More people began to share their stories, their fears, and their hopes for a better future. The tension in the room slowly began to ease, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. Just as the conversation seemed to be making progress, the doors to the gym burst open. A group of protesters entered, carrying signs that read, "No justice, no peace," and chanting loudly. The room erupted into chaos as the protesters clashed with some attendees who wanted the event to continue. Marcus quickly took the microphone. "Please, everyone, calm down," he urged. "This is exactly why we're here, to have these conversations without violence or disruption." The crowd quieted slightly, but the tension remained palpable. One of the protesters, a young woman named Tasha, stepped forward. "This is a farce," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "You can't fix this with a few meetings. People like him don't change." Ryan stepped forward cautiously. "Tasha, you're right. That words aren't enough," he said. "That's why I'm here, to take responsibility and to work toward real, tangible change. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to prove myself." Tasha stared at him for a long moment before stepping back into the crowd. The room fell silent again, the weight of the moment hanging heavily in the air. After the disruption, Marcus and Ryan worked together to steer the conversation back on track. Marcus shared Ella's story, describing the impact the arrest had on her and their family. He spoke of her nightmares, her fear of police officers, and the slow process of rebuilding her sense of safety. Ryan listened with tears in his eyes. "I can never undo what I did to Ella," he said quietly. "But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." The vulnerability in his words seemed to break down some of the barriers in the room. By the end of the event, the atmosphere had shifted. While many still harbored doubts, there was a sense that progress was possible. Inspired by the success of the event, Marcus and Ryan decided to launch a series of workshops focusing on police reform and community engagement. The workshops would include training for officers on implicit bias, as well as programs to foster positive relationships between police and youth. Ryan also proposed a mentorship program where officers could work with teens to build trust and understanding. "If we start with the next generation," he said, "maybe we can create a future where events like this aren't necessary." As the night ended, Marcus and Ryan stood outside the gym, watching as attendees slowly made their way home. The tension of the evening had given way to a quiet sense of accomplishment. "You did good tonight," Marcus said, clapping Ryan on the shoulder. Ryan shook his head. "We did good. This isn't something I could have done alone." Marcus smiled faintly. "Just remember, Daniels, this is only the beginning." Ryan nodded, his resolve strengthened. For the first time in a long time, he felt hope. not just for himself, but for the community he was determined to help heal. In the weeks following the community dialogue event, Riverwood began to see glimmers of change. The town still bore the scars of mistrust, but the seeds planted during that emotional night started to take root. Officer Ryan Daniels and Marcus Johnson, now unlikely collaborators, worked tirelessly to build bridges between the police and the people. Ryan's transformation was palpable. Every morning, he arrived at the community center early, often before anyone else, helping to set up programs for the kids. Despite lingering skepticism from parents and staff, Ryan's consistency began to chip away at their reservations. One afternoon, Ella approached Ryan hesitantly. She carried a sketch pad and a set of crayons. "Can you help me draw a flower?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan crouched down to her level, his heart swelling. "Of course," he said, taking a seat on the floor beside her. Together they sketched vibrant sunflowers under a bright blue sky. It was a small moment, but it marked a significant step in rebuilding trust. Ella's recovery was a slow, deliberate process. Her nightmares became less frequent, replaced by vivid dreams of fields filled with flowers and friendly faces. Marcus made it a point to give her space to heal on her terms, while also ensuring she felt supported. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies, Ella spoke softly. "Daddy, do you think Officer Ryan is a bad man?" Marcus hesitated, caught off guard by her question. "I think he made a big mistake," he said carefully, "but he's trying very hard to be better." Ella nodded thoughtfully. "He helped me with my drawing today," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "Maybe he's learning." Her words struck Marcus deeply. If his daughter, so young and so affected by Ryan's actions, could find it in her heart to see the good in him, perhaps the community could too. Meanwhile, Ryan took his newfound understanding to the police department. He lobbied Chief Linda Carter for changes to officer training, emphasizing the importance of community engagement and implicit bias education. During one meeting, Ryan addressed a room of skeptical officers. "I know many of you don't agree with what I'm doing," he began, "but I've seen firsthand the harm that unchecked biases can cause, not just to the community, but to ourselves. If we want to truly protect and serve, we need to start by looking inward." Some officers scoffed, while others nodded thoughtfully. One rookie, Officer Rachel Kim, approached Ryan afterward. "I've been struggling with how to connect with people in this neighborhood," she admitted. "Do you think you could mentor me?" Ryan smiled, the weight on his shoulders feeling just a little lighter. "I'd be honored." As part of their mission to foster trust, Marcus and Ryan launched a youth engagement program called Bridge Builders. The initiative paired teenagers with police mentors, creating opportunities for open dialogue and mutual understanding. The program included basketball games, art workshops, and even cooking classes, where participants worked together to prepare meals for the community. Jamal, the troubled teen Ryan had been mentoring, initially resisted the program. "Why should I trust any of you?" he asked during their first session. "Because trust isn't given, it's earned," Ryan replied. "And I'm here to earn it." Over time, Jamal began to open up, sharing his dreams of becoming a chef and his frustrations with being stereotyped because of his appearance. Ryan, in turn, shared stories from his own life, admitting to the mistakes he had made and the lessons he had learned. Their bond grew stronger with each passing week. One bright Saturday morning, the Bridge Builders program hosted its first major event, a community cleanup and block party. Residents, police officers, and youth came together to pick up litter, paint murals, and plant flowers in neglected spaces around Riverwood. Ella, alongside other children, helped plant a sunflower garden outside the community center. As she placed the final seed in the soil, she looked up at Ryan, who was working nearby. "These flowers will grow big and strong, right?" she asked. "They will," Ryan said with a smile. "Just like this community." The block party that followed was a vibrant celebration of unity. Families shared homemade dishes, children played games, and live music filled the air. For the first time in years, the atmosphere in Riverwood felt hopeful. Despite the progress, not everyone was convinced. Some residents remained wary of the police, and tensions flared occasionally. During one patrol, Ryan encountered a group of teenagers loitering outside a convenience store. When he approached to talk, one of them shouted, "We don't want you here, Officer Daniels." Ryan raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said calmly. "I just want to make sure you're all safe." The teens exchanged skeptical glances, but didn't escalate the situation. It was a small encounter, but it reinforced the fragility of the progress being made. As the weeks turned into months, Marcus and Ryan began discussing long-term goals for Riverwood. Marcus proposed expanding the Bridge Builders program to other neighborhoods, while Ryan suggested creating a citizen advisory board to provide oversight for the police department. "Change takes time," Marcus said during one of their meetings, "but if we keep pushing, we can make Riverwood a model for other communities." Ryan nodded. "We owe it to Ella and to every kid in this town." Their collaboration wasn't without its challenges. They clashed over details, often debating late into the night. But their shared commitment to a better future kept them moving forward. Ella's healing became a symbol of the community's progress. During a school art show, she proudly displayed a painting of a sunflower field with the caption, "Even in the darkest times, flowers can grow." The painting moved many in attendance, including Ryan. "You've got real talent," he told Ella afterward. "Keep sharing your light with the world." Ella beamed, her confidence blossoming like the flowers she loved to paint. Word of Riverwood's transformation began to spread, drawing attention from neighboring towns and even national media. Maya Lopez wrote a feature article titled, "The Healing of Riverwood, a Story of Redemption and Resilience," which garnered widespread praise. Ryan was invited to speak at a police reform conference, where he shared his journey with a room full of officers, community leaders, and activists. "Change isn't easy," he said. "It's uncomfortable, and it requires us to face parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. But it's worth it, because every step we take toward understanding brings us closer to a safer, stronger community." As the chapter drew to a close, Ryan and Marcus stood together outside the community center, watching as children played and families laughed. The sunflower garden had begun to bloom, its vibrant yellow petals swaying gently in the breeze. "We've come a long way," Marcus said, his voice filled with quiet pride. "But there's still more to do," Ryan replied. Marcus nodded, a determined smile on his face. "Then, let's get to work." A year after the tumultuous events that shook Riverwood, the town gathered under a clear blue sky for its annual block party. What made this year special wasn't just the festivities, but the palpable sense of unity that filled the air. The park, once a symbol of fear and division, now bustled with life. Children chased each other across the grass. Families shared laughter over picnic tables, and music from a local band echoed warmly through the crowd. Ella Johnson, now 6 years old, stood proudly by a vibrant sunflower garden she had helped plant months earlier. Her favorite doll in one hand and a homemade lemonade stand beside her, she welcomed customers with an infectious smile. "Daddy, do you think we'll sell out today?" she asked Marcus, who stood nearby with a watchful yet content gaze. I have no doubt, sweetheart, Marcus replied, ruffling her hair. These are the best lemonades in all of Riverwood. Across the park, Officer Ryan Daniels leaned against a booth, labeled Bridge Builders Initiative, chatting with Officer Rachel Kim and Jamal, the teen he had mentored. Ryan looked out at the crowd, a sense of accomplishment mingling with gratitude. The journey hadn't been easy, but seeing the community come together like this made every challenge worth it. As Marcus watched Ella interact with customers, he couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd come. The arrest that had shaken his world now felt like a distant memory, though the lessons it imparted remained fresh. He thought about the countless nights spent organizing protests, speaking at forums, and standing firm against backlash, all for the sake of his daughter and countless others who deserved a safer world. Nearby, Mrs. Johnson, the elderly neighbor who had stood up for Ella that fateful day, approached Marcus with a warm smile. "It's good to see the community like this," she said, her voice tinged with pride. "You've done so much, Marcus." Marcus nodded, his expression softening. "It wasn't just me. Everyone here played a part, especially Ryan." Mrs. Johnson raised an eyebrow. "I'll admit, I was skeptical at first, but that man has truly changed." Marcus followed her gaze to where Ryan was helping a group of children set up a kite. The kids laughed as the kite soared into the sky, Ryan's once stern demeanor replaced with an ease that spoke of growth and redemption. Ryan had embraced his role as a mentor to both officers and community members. At the police department, he spearheaded a new training program that emphasized empathy, cultural competence, and the importance of building relationships with the neighborhoods officers served. He also continued his advocacy work, traveling to conferences to share his story and inspire others to confront their own biases. At the block party, he mingled effortlessly with residents, offering handshakes, hugs, and words of encouragement. The walls of mistrust that had once surrounded him were all but gone, replaced by a cautious but growing respect. "Officer Ryan," Ella's voice cut through the hum of the crowd as she ran toward him, her lemonade stand momentarily forgotten. She held out a small daisy chain. "This is for you." Ryan knelt to accept the gift, his smile wide and genuine. "Thank you, Ella. I'll wear it proudly." Ella giggled before running back to her stand, leaving Ryan to marvel at the resilience of the little girl who had changed his life in ways he never imagined. The block party served as a testament to Riverwood's transformation. Initiatives like the Bridge Builders program had expanded, involving neighboring towns and drawing attention from national organizations. The Sunflower Garden, once a simple gesture of hope, had become a symbol of the town's resilience, featured in news stories and social media campaigns. As evening fell and lanterns illuminated the park, Marcus and Ryan took a quiet moment to reflect. They sat on a bench overlooking the festivities, the hum of conversation and laughter, a soothing backdrop. "We've come a long way," Ryan said, his voice tinged with emotion. "But I know there's still work to do." Marcus nodded. "There always will be. Change isn't a destination, it's a journey. But what matters is that we're walking it together." As the event drew to a close, a group of children gathered around Marcus and Ryan, tugging them toward the makeshift stage. "You have to dance," one child insisted, laughter bubbling from the crowd. Marcus chuckled, throwing Ryan a playful smirk. "You're on your own for this one." "Oh no, we're in this together," Ryan replied, pulling Marcus toward the stage. The two men joined the children in a spirited, clumsy dance that had the entire park in stitches. For a moment, they weren't a civil rights activist and a reformed officer. They were just two men, celebrating life, community, and the power of second chances. As they danced, Ella clapped along from the sidelines, her laughter ringing out like a melody of hope. The sunflowers swayed gently in the evening breeze, their vibrant yellow petals glowing under the lantern light. In the weeks that followed, Riverwood continued to grow and heal. The partnerships formed during this journey became a blueprint for other communities grappling with similar issues. Marcus and Ryan often found themselves speaking at events, their shared story, a powerful example of what could be achieved when people chose understanding over division. One afternoon, as Marcus walked Ella home from school, she tugged on his hand. "Daddy, do you think the flowers will keep growing?" Marcus smiled, squeezing her hand. "They will, sweetheart. Just like this community." In his heart, Marcus knew the road ahead would still have its challenges, but as long as people like Ella, Ryan, and the residents of Riverwood continued to nurture the seeds of change, the town would flourish. And so, under the glow of a setting sun, with laughter in the air and hope in their hearts, Riverwood embarked on a new chapter, a story not of division and pain, but of unity, growth, and the enduring power of redemption. As we close this chapter of Ryan and Marcus's journey, a story of redemption, forgiveness, and the power of community, we want to hear from you. What part of their story moved you the most? Have you witnessed or experienced moments of change like this in your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters, and we'd love to hear it. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. By subscribing, you'll ensure you don't miss the next chapter, another tale filled with emotion, transformation, and hope. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. Together, we're sharing stories that remind us of what's possible when we choose to listen, grow, and come together. See you in the next Story Star.